The sun hung low in the Texas sky, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Birchfield Drive, a neighborhood that seemed frozen in time, where every house stood like a sentinel of suburban peace. Kendrick Vail, at 29 years old, stepped out of his parents' home, feeling the familiar warmth of the evening air wrap around him like an old blanket. He had just returned from a deployment that had stretched his limits, years in the special forces where danger was a constant companion, where every decision carried the weight of life and death. But here, in the suburbs of San Antonio, he sought solace, a reprieve from the vigilance that had defined his existence. The neighborhood hadn't changed much since his childhood. Kids on bikes weaving through the streets, families unloading groceries with polite waves, and the distant hum of lawnmowers echoing like a lullaby. It was the kind of place people moved to for safety, for the illusion of control over their little corner of the world. Kendrick laced up his running shoes, pulling on a light jacket against the cooling breeze. He wasn't thinking about combat zones or the brothers he'd lost. He was thinking about the simple joys, his mother's homemade meals, his father's booming laugh that filled the house like thunder. As he set out for his jog, his footsteps fell into a rhythmic cadence, the pavement beneath him familiar, almost comforting. The sky deepened to a fiery orange, the kind that promised a peaceful night. He nodded to a few passers-by, their faces blurring into the background of normalcy. But normalcy, he knew from experience, was fragile, a thin veneer over the unpredictability of human nature. Unbeknownst to Kendrick, Clifford Harlan watched from the shadows of his porch, his mid-50s frame thick around the middle, his eyes sharp with self-appointed authority. Clifford wasn't an official anything. No badge, no uniform, no election had granted him power. Yet, in his mind, he was the guardian of Birchfield Drive, the self-proclaimed watchdog of the Homeowners Association. He patrolled the streets with a notebook in hand, jotting down infractions. A truck parked an inch too far from the curb. Kids playing basketball a minute past sundown. His voice carried like a foghorn, unnecessary and intrusive. But the neighbors tolerated him, dismissing him as that guy who took things too seriously. Lately, though, Clifford had escalated his role, strapping a pistol to his hip like a badge of honor, as if the weight of the metal validated his delusions of control. Kendrick's mother had mentioned Clifford in passing during phone calls while he was overseas, stories of petty notes and overzealous lectures. Kendrick had chuckled then, picturing it as harmless neighborhood drama. Every community had its eccentrics, right? He never imagined that this man, this Clifford Harlan, would become the catalyst for a test more intense than some of his battlefield encounters. As Kendrick jogged deeper into the neighborhood, his mind wandered to old friends from Fort Bragg, plans to catch up over a beer. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine, and a dog barked in the distance, pulling him back to the present. Then movement caught his eyes, someone stepping out from between two parked cars, blocking his path. Clifford's hand hovered near his hip, eyes locked on Kendrick with a suspicion that bordered on paranoia. "Hey," Clifford barked, his voice slicing through the evening calm like a knife. Kendrick slowed, surprised by the aggression. He was used to nods and waves, not this confrontational glare. Clifford's posture screamed confrontation, his hand inching closer to the pistol's grip. Kendrick's instincts, honed by years of training, sharpened instantly. This wasn't a friendly neighbor. This was a man looking for trouble. "What are you doing here?" Clifford demanded, his tone laced with accusation. Kendrick kept his voice steady, calm, control the pace, control the outcome as his training dictated. I live here, just out for a jog. But Clifford shook his head, disbelief etched into his features. To him, a young black man moving through the streets at dusk didn't fit the picture of a neighbor. It screamed intruder, a threat to the order he imagined he maintained. The tension built slowly, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Clifford's words dripped with entitlement. This is a private neighborhood. Who are you really? Kendrick stopped fully, hands visible at his sides, refusing to escalate. He pointed down the street, 3 blocks that way. Brown brick house with a silver pickup. My parents' place, you can ask them. But Clifford sneered, his hand twitching nearer the weapon, confidence bolstered by the illusion of power. The streetlights flickered on, casting harsh shadows that amplified the standoff. A porch light snapped on nearby, and Mrs. Denning, an older woman Kendrick remembered from his childhood. She used to pay him to mow her lawn, stepped out with her terrier. She froze, taking in the scene. Clifford squared up, hand near his gun, facing down a familiar face. "Cliff, what's going on?" she called, her voice shaky. Kendrick raised his voice just enough. "Ma'am, I'm just trying to get home, grew up here. Parents on Birchfield." Recognition dawned on her face. "That's the Vail boy. He's been in the army. Put that thing away." Clifford's annoyance flared. He didn't like being challenged, especially in public. "Ma'am, go back inside. I've got this under control." "But, Mrs. Denning clutched her dog tighter. "Under control? You're pointing a gun at a neighbor." The dog's yip echoed, drawing more eyes. Blinds shifted, shadows moved behind curtains. The neighborhood was waking up to the drama unfolding on its quiet streets. Kendrick felt the heat rising, second by second. His parents' house was so close, yet this felt like a battlefield. He lowered his voice to Clifford. "You don't want to do this. I'm not a threat." But Clifford's lip curled in defiance. "I decide who's a threat around here." Kendrick almost laughed at the absurdity. This man had constructed a fantasy where he was the law, backed by nothing but his ego and a firearm. Another voice joined the fray. George Randall, from 2 houses down, stepping onto his porch with phone in hand, already recording. "Cliff, for God's sake, stop. I'm calling the cops." The glow of the screen captured everything, turning the private confrontation into something permanent, undeniable. Clifford hesitated, his hand hovering, eyes darting between Kendrick, George, and Mrs. Denning. The audience grew, and with it, Clifford's desperation to maintain face. The silence stretched, sharp and alive. Clifford's pride pushed him further, his words hanging like threats. Kendrick stood firm, his military discipline a shield against the escalating chaos. He calculated every possibility, close the distance in 3 strides, disarm if needed. But that wasn't the goal. The goal was de-escalation, getting home without bloodshed. As more neighbors emerged, whispering and watching, the standoff intensified, the night turning sharper than the setting sun. Clifford's hesitation lingered, but pride is a stubborn force. His hand twitched again, the pistol glinting under the lights. Kendrick's pulse steadied. He knew cornered men were unpredictable. "You're worked up, I get it," Kendrick said softly. "But you're not law enforcement. Let's both walk away." For a moment it seemed possible, the tension teetering on the edge of resolution. But Clifford's ego wouldn't yield, and the confrontation was about to escalate beyond words. The air on Birchfield Drive thickened with unspoken fears as Clifford's hand inched closer to his pistol, his eyes burning with a mix of suspicion and self-righteousness. Kendrick Vail remained rooted, his body a study in controlled stillness. every muscle attuned to the potential for violence. Years in the special forces had taught him that true power lay not in aggression but in restraint, in reading the subtle cues of a man's unraveling. Clifford's chest heaved, his posture rigid, as if the weight of his imagined authority pressed down on him harder than the humid Texas evening. "You don't look like you live here," Clifford spat, his voice cracking slightly, betraying the nerves beneath his bluster. Kendrick swallowed a breath, forcing his shoulders to relax. This wasn't a foreign checkpoint where suspicion could explode into gunfire. This was home, or it was supposed to be. Yet here he stood, treated like an outsider for the crime of existing in his own skin while jogging. "Name, address, now," Clifford demanded, his hand twitching as if the pistol called to him. Kendrick pointed again, his voice firm but measured. 3 blocks, brown brick, silver pickup, ask anyone." But Clifford's sneer deepened, his mind locked in a narrative where Kendrick was the intruder, the problem to be solved. The street, once quiet, now buzzed with emerging witnesses. Porch lights illuminating faces pressed against windows, doors creaking open. George Randall's phone captured the scene, his voice cutting through. "Cliff, you've lost it. Put the gun away before the police get here." Clifford stiffened at the mention of rules of the HOA, his self-proclaimed domain. "Somebody's got to enforce the rules around here." Kendrick bit back a laugh. Combat had real rules of engagement, life or death protocols. This was theater, dangerous theater with a loaded prop. "Mrs." Denning stepped forward, her terrier yipping. "Cliff, that's Albert and Lorraine's son. He mowed my lawn in high school." For a flicker, doubt crossed Clifford's face, but pride extinguished it. "You think I'm stupid? People like you always have excuses." The words hung heavy, laced with unspoken biases. Kendrick's jaw tightened, but he held steady. "You're pointing a gun without knowing the facts. That's the mistake." Voices multiplied. "Mr. Alvarez from across the street. Cliff, you've gone too far. He's served this country." Clifford's eyes darted, his breathing quickening. The audience stripped his illusion, but instead of backing down, he snapped. The pistol cleared the holster with a metallic click, barrel angled toward Kendrick. Gasps rippled through the neighborhood. "Drop it, Cliff," George shouted, phone shaking. Kendrick didn't flinch, his voice slicing through. "If you point that at me, you're gambling with your life." Clifford's grip trembled, his face red, sweat beading. He wasn't ready for this. Pretenders with guns were the deadliest. The standoff stretched, every second a lifetime. Kendrick noted the uneven stance, the floating trigger finger, no discipline. "You're not the judge here. Put it down." Clifford roared, "Don't tell me what to do." But doubt flickered as neighbors begged. Phones recorded and sirens wailed in the distance. The tension peaked as Clifford's arm sagged, then snapped up again. Kendrick pressed. "Think about your family. Is pride worth this?" The street held its breath, the razor sharp line between tragedy and survival thinning with each tremble of Clifford's hand. Sirens pierced the night, red and blue lights flooding Birchfield Drive like a storm of judgment. Clifford's pistol wavered, his face pale under the strobes, panic replacing bravado. Officers emerged, guns drawn. "Drop the weapon, now." Clifford froze, trapped in his crumbling fantasy. Kendrick stood unyielding, his voice a lifeline. "Put it down, Clifford. This is it." Clifford's hand shook violently, eyes darting wildly. "They'll understand. I was protecting." But Kendrick cut through. "They'll see the truth. Lower it." Neighbors held their breath. Mrs. Denning praying, George recording, Mr. Alvarez gripping his wife. The officers inched forward, commands thunderous. In a final crumble, the pistol slipped from Clifford's grasp, clattering to the asphalt. Officers surged, wrestling him down as he thrashed. "I'm not a criminal." Cuffs snapped. His venom spat at Kendrick. "You don't belong here." Kendrick's response was silence, restraint his true strength. As Clifford was hauled away, the neighborhood exhaled, but the weight lingered. Officers took statements. George shared the video. Kendrick's parents arrived, his mother embracing him in relief. The street buzzed with shock, whispers of guilt. "We let this happen." Morning brought sunlight, but no erasure. Conversations hummed at mailboxes, eyes lingering on the confrontation spot. George visited with the footage. "This is spreading." The HOA meeting convened that evening, voices clashing in blame and reflection. Kendrick spoke last. "Silence builds men like Clifford. Restraint is strength." The community shifted, cracks exposed but mending begun. As night fell, Kendrick reflected on the porch. Belonging wasn't shouted, it was stood for. The day ended not in tragedy, but in a hard one lesson. Pride unchecked breeds danger, but calm can reclaim the peace.
If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.